The sun was setting over Dubai's modern skyline as Sheikh Rafik Al Mansour signed the last document on his desk. Another billion-dollar deal closed, another victory for the Al Mansour empire. But something felt empty inside him. His assistant knocked on the door. "Your Excellency, the board members are waiting in the conference room." Rafik stood up, straightening his designer suit. At 38, he had everything money could buy. The tallest building in Dubai bore his family's name. His face appeared on business magazines monthly. Women from royal families across the Middle East hoped to catch his eye, but none of it satisfied him anymore. "Tell them I'll be there shortly," he said, walking to the window. His reflection showed a handsome man with sharp features and dark eyes that could intimidate anyone in the boardroom. But lately, those eyes looked tired. The meeting was about a new oil field discovered in the Western Desert. Rafik needed to inspect it personally before signing the final contracts. It was a routine trip he'd made countless times before. "Your convoy is ready, Your Excellency," his head of security informed him the next morning. 5 armored vehicles waited in front of his palace. 20 armed men would accompany him. Maybe it was excessive, but his family insisted. There had been rumors of rebel groups in the area. They drove for hours through the desert. Rafik reviewed documents on his tablet, barely noticing the endless sand dunes outside. This deal would make him even richer. His father would be proud. The family legacy would grow stronger. The attack came out of nowhere. The first explosion hit the lead vehicle. Then gunfire erupted from all sides. Smoke filled the air. Rafik heard shouting, more explosions. His security team pushed him out of the car. "Run, Your Excellency. We'll hold them off." Everything happened so fast. Rafik ran into the desert as bullets flew past him. He'd never felt so helpless in his life. The fine Italian shoes that cost thousands sank into the hot sand. His expensive suit was covered in dust. He ran until he couldn't hear the gunfire anymore. The sun beat down mercilessly. He had no water, no phone, no idea where he was. Hours passed, his throat burned, his vision blurred. The world started spinning. The last thing he saw before collapsing was a small figure approaching through the heat waves. A woman's voice called out to him. Then everything went black. He woke up to the feeling of a cool cloth on his forehead. The room was simple, with mud brick walls and a small window. A young woman sat beside his bed, wringing out a cloth in a bowl of water. "You're awake," she said softly. "Don't try to move yet, you have a fever." Rafik tried to speak, but his throat was too dry. She helped him drink water from a clay cup. Her hands were gentle, her touch careful. "My name is Layla," she told him. "I found you in the desert. You're safe now." He looked at her more closely. She wore simple clothes, no makeup. Her dark hair was tied back practically, but her eyes, they held a kindness he hadn't seen in years. Not since his mother was alive. "Thank you," he managed to say. He didn't tell her who he was. For the first time in his life, he didn't want to be Sheikh Rafik Al Mansour. He just wanted to be a man receiving kindness from a stranger. "Rest now," Layla said, adjusting his blanket. "Whatever happened to you out there, it's over. You're safe here." As Rafik drifted back to sleep, he felt something strange in his chest, something he couldn't explain. He'd signed contracts worth billions without hesitation. He'd faced down the toughest business rivals without blinking. But this woman's simple kindness made his heart beat faster than any deal ever had. He didn't know it yet, but his life would never be the same after this day. The mighty sheikh who had everything was about to learn what it meant to truly want something, someone he couldn't simply buy. The desert wind blew outside the window, carrying the scent of sand and fate. In this humble room, a story was beginning. A story of power and simplicity, of wealth and worth, of a man who had the world but would trade it all for the heart of a woman who saw him as just a man. Layla lived alone in her small house at the edge of the village. Her parents had passed away years ago, leaving her with little more than their modest home and the respect of the village people. She worked as a nurse at the local clinic, using the medical knowledge she'd learned from her mother. She spent the next 2 days caring for the mysterious man she'd found in the desert. His expensive clothes told her he was wealthy, but she didn't ask questions. In her village, hospitality was sacred. You helped first and asked questions later. "You need to eat something," she told him. bringing a bowl of simple lamb stew. "You've been without food for too long." Rafiq sat up in bed, surprised by how good the simple food smelled. He was used to meals prepared by world-famous chefs. But somehow, this humble stew made his mouth water more than any fancy restaurant ever had. "Did you make this?" he asked, taking a spoonful. "Yes, it's my mother's recipe." Layla sat in the chair beside his bed. She always said good food heals more than medicine. She was right. Rafiq couldn't remember the last time he'd eaten something made with such care. In his world, everything was about showing off, impressing others. This was different, this was real. "Your fever is gone, but you should rest another day," Layla said. "Whatever happened to you out there, you're lucky to be alive." Rafiq thought about his security team, his convoy. He needed to contact someone, let them know he was alive. But something held him back. Here, in this simple room with this kind woman, he felt peace he hadn't known in years. "Tell me about yourself," he said instead. Layla smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. "There's not much to tell. I work at the clinic in the village. I help people when I can. That's all." "That's not all," Rafiq said softly. "You saved my life." A light blush colored her cheeks. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," he said. "Not everyone would." He thought about his world, where every action had a price, where people helped only when they wanted something in return. Layla's kindness was different, pure, real. That evening she brought him clean clothes, simple cotton pants and a shirt that belonged to her late father. His expensive suit was ruined anyway. "Thank you," he said, touching the modest clothing, "for everything." "So you still haven't told me your name," she said. He hesitated. "Rafiq," he said finally, leaving out his title and family name. "Just Rafiq." "Well, just Rafiq," she smiled. "You're welcome." That night, he couldn't sleep. He listened to the desert, whined outside, thought about his life. In his palace, he had hundreds of servants, but no one who really cared. Here, one woman with nothing had shown him more genuine kindness than he'd known in years. The next morning, he found Layla in her small garden. She was tending to herbs she used for healing. The rising sun made her skin glow, and for a moment, he forgot to breathe. "Good morning," she said, looking up. "How are you feeling?" "Better." He walked closer, looking at the plants. "What are these?" "Medicinal herbs. This one helps with fever." She pointed to different plants. "This is for pain, this for stomach problems, this for healing wounds." He listened, fascinated. In his hospitals, everything came in pills and injections. This was ancient wisdom passed down through generations. "You know so much about healing," he said. "My mother taught me. She was the village healer before me." Layla picked some mint leaves. "Would you like tea?" They sat in her small kitchen, drinking mint tea from simple clay cups. Rafiq couldn't remember the last time he'd had such a normal conversation. No business deals, no politics, no showing off wealth. "The village children come here when they're sick," Layla told him. "Sometimes their parents can't pay, but how can I turn away a sick child?" Rafiq thought about the billions in his bank accounts, the towers bearing his name. What good was all that money if it wasn't helping people like Layla? "You have a beautiful heart," he said without thinking. She looked at him, surprised by his words. Their eyes met, and something passed between them. Something that made both their hearts beat faster. A noise outside broke the moment. Voices calling his name. His security team had found him. "Your Excellency, Sheikh Rafiq." Layla's eyes widened. She looked at him, understanding dawning on her face. "Sheikh Rafiq al-Mansour," she whispered. "The billionaire?" Before he could answer, his men burst. Through the door they were armed, defensive, ready to protect him. "Your Excellency, thank Allah you're alive. We've been searching everywhere." Rafiq stood up, and suddenly he was Sheikh al-Mansour again. The powerful businessman, the billionaire. But he'd never felt less like himself. Layla stood in the corner of her kitchen, looking small and uncertain. The simple spell of the past 2 days was broken. "We need to get you back to Dubai immediately," his head of security said. "Your family is worried sick. The business empire needs you." Rafiq looked at Layla one last time. She gave him a small smile, but her eyes were sad. She understood. Their worlds were too different. This had been just a dream. As his men led him to the waiting helicopter, Rafiq felt like he was leaving something precious behind, something more valuable than all his billions. But he was Sheikh Rafiq Al-Mansour. He had responsibilities, duties, a legacy to protect. The helicopter lifted off, leaving Layla's small house behind. She stood in her doorway, watching until they disappeared into the sky. Neither of them knew that this wasn't the end of their story. It was just the beginning. Back in Dubai, Rafiq's life quickly returned to its usual rhythm. His massive office at the top of Al Mansour Tower buzzed with activity. Business deals worth billions needed his attention. The attack on his convoy made international news, and everyone wanted to know how he survived. "The press wants an interview," his PR manager said. "They're calling you the desert survivor. This could be great publicity for the company." Rafiq barely heard her. He stood at his floor-to-ceiling window looking out at the city he helped build. All he could think about was a small mud brick house and the woman who lived there. "Your Excellency, are you listening?" "Cancel the interviews," he said. All of them. His family was even worse. They'd arranged a huge celebration at the palace to welcome him home. Hundreds of guests, politicians, business leaders, and eligible women from wealthy families filled the grand ballroom. Rafiq, darling. His Aunt Amira grabbed his arm. "You must meet Princess Samira. Her father owns half the oil fields in Saudi Arabia." A beautiful woman in an expensive designer dress approached him. Any other time he might have been interested. Now all he could think about was Layla's simple smile. "Sheikh Rafiq," Princess Samira purred. "I was so worried when I heard about the attack. How did you survive in that awful desert?" He thought about the gentle hands that nursed him back to health, the mint tea in clay cups, the honest conversation in a humble kitchen. "I had help," he said simply. That night, alone in his massive bedroom, Rafiq couldn't sleep. The silk sheets felt wrong, the air conditioning was too cold. He missed the desert wind through Layla's small window. His phone buzzed. Another crisis at the company. A competitor was trying to take advantage of his absence to steal a major deal. "We need to act fast," his brother Hassan said over the phone. "The board is getting nervous. They're questioning your focus since the attack." "Call an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning," Rafiq said. He needed to show everyone he was still in control, but as he prepared for bed, he found himself holding the simple cotton shirt Layla had given him. He'd kept it, hidden from his servants who wanted to throw it away. It still smelled like her herbs. The next morning, the board meeting was tense. Men in expensive suits watched him carefully, looking for any sign of weakness. "The attack was unfortunate," Rafiq told them, "but Al Mansour Enterprises is stronger than ever. I'm announcing a new expansion project." He laid out his plans. New buildings, new investments, bigger profits. The board members nodded approvingly. This was the sheikh they knew, strong, decisive, focused on money and power. But during lunch, alone in his office, Rafiq found himself looking up Layla's village on his computer. It was poor. The clinic where she worked needed supplies, the schools were old. "Your Excellency?" His assistant interrupted his thoughts. "Princess Samira's father is on line 1. He wants to discuss a possible merger and a marriage alliance." Rafiq stared at the phone. This was what his family wanted, a proper marriage to strengthen the empire, more money, more power. He picked up the phone to accept the call. Then he saw his reflection in the window. He looked exactly like what he was, a rich man in an expensive suit, about to make another deal. But was that all he wanted to be? He thought about Layla, treating sick children for free, about her mother's recipe for lamb stew, about real kindness that asked nothing in return. "Tell him I'll call back," Rafiq said. That afternoon he called a different meeting, this time with his charitable foundation's board. "I want to start a new project," he told them. "Rural medical clinics, schools, infrastructure for remote villages." The board members looked confused. This wasn't like him. Sheikh Rafiq Al-Mansour built luxury hotels and office towers, not village clinics. "The budget for this project will be unlimited," he continued. "And I want to start with this village." He pointed to the map, to the small dot in the desert where He'd found something more precious than gold. His phone kept ringing. Princess Samira's father was persistent. His aunt sent messages about other suitable brides. The business world wanted to know his next move. But for the first time in his life, Sheikh Rafiq al-Mansour wasn't thinking about money or power. He was thinking about a woman who had seen him as just a man, who had helped him without knowing his name or wealth. That night, he stood on his palace balcony looking at the stars. The same stars he'd seen from Layla's garden. In all his life, he'd never felt so torn. He was Sheikh Rafiq al-Mansour. He had a duty to his family name, to his business empire, to his legacy. But his heart was still in a small mud brick house drinking mint tea with a woman who cared more about healing sick children than counting money. As he looked at the city he'd helped build, full of tall towers and bright lights, Rafiq made a decision. Tomorrow would bring changes, big changes, because for the first time in his life, the most powerful businessman in Dubai was going to follow his heart instead of his bank account, and nothing in his world would ever be the same. The news spread through Layla's village like wildfire. A team of construction workers had arrived in big trucks. They carried papers with the Al-Mansour Company logo. They were building a new medical center, they said, modern equipment, training for local healers. Everything free of charge. Layla stood in front of her small clinic, watching the trucks arrive. Her heart beat faster, knowing who must be behind this. "This is wonderful news," old Mrs. Fatima said, squeezing Layla's hand. "No more 2-hour drives to the city for serious cases." But Layla felt uneasy. Was this his way of paying her back? She didn't want payment. The memory of those 2 days with him, just him, not the sheikh, was enough. Back in Dubai, Rafiq faced his own battles. His brother Hassan stormed into his office, waving a financial report. "Have you lost your mind?" Hassan demanded. "Millions spent on a village clinic, schools? What about our hotel project?" "The hotels can wait," Rafiq said calmly. "These people need help now. Since when do you care about village people?" Hassan's eyes narrowed. "This is about that woman, isn't it? The one who found you in the desert." Rafiq stood up slowly. Even Hassan took a step back. The sheikh's anger was legendary in business circles. "Be careful, brother," Rafiq said quietly. "You're talking about the woman who saved my life." Hassan wasn't finished. He went straight to their mother. That evening in the family palace, Rafiq's mother summoned him to her private sitting room. Despite her age, Sheikha Amina was still a formidable woman. "My son," she said, pouring traditional Arabic coffee, "Hassan tells me you're spending millions on a village clinic." "Yes, mother." "And this has nothing to do with the village girl who helped you?" Rafiq met his mother's eyes. "She didn't just help me, mother. She saved me, in more ways than one." Sheikha Amina studied her son's face. She saw something there she'd never seen before, something that worried her. "Rafiq, you are Sheikh al-Mansour. Your responsibility is to this family, to our empire. Village girls don't belong in our world." "Maybe it's our world that needs to change," Rafiq said. His mother set down her coffee cup. "I've invited Princess Samira and her family for dinner tomorrow night. Don't be late." It was a command, not a request. Rafiq left his mother's room feeling the weight of his family's expectations, but it only made him more determined. The next morning, he did something he'd never done before. He drove, himself alone, out to Layla's village. No security team, no entourage, just him in a simple car. He found her at her clinic, treating a young boy with a scraped knee. She looked up when he entered, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. "Your Excellency," she said finally, her voice formal. "The village council asked me to thank you for your generous gift." Layla, the formal title from her lips hurt more than he expected. "Please, just Rafiq." "Why are you here?" she asked, bandaging the boy's knee. "Surely you have more important things to do than visit a village clinic." "Nothing is more important right now." He stepped closer. "We need to talk." The boy hopped off the examination table. Layla gave him a candy, and he ran out, leaving them alone. "There's nothing to talk about," Layla said, cleaning up her supplies. You're Sheikh Al-Mansour. I'm a village nurse. Thank you for the new medical center, but look at me, Rafiq said softly. When she did, he saw tears in her eyes. I haven't slept properly since I left here. Food has no taste. Business deals that used to excite me now feel empty. Don't, she whispered. Please, this can't. Why not? He moved closer. Because I'm rich, because you're not. Money means nothing, you taught me that. Your family would never accept someone like me. I don't care what they accept. He took her hand, it was trembling. In my world, everything has a price, everything can be bought, but not you. Not what I feel when I'm with you. A noise at the door made them step apart. Mrs. Fatima entered. With her arthritis problem. She stopped short when she saw the sheikh. Oh, Your Excellency. We didn't know you were visiting today. Soon the whole village knew. Sheikh Al-Mansour himself was at the clinic. People gathered outside, whispering. Wondering, Rafiq's phone buzzed. His mother. The dinner with Princess Samira's family was in a few hours. I have to go, he told Layla. But this isn't finished. We're not finished. She shook her head. Some things aren't meant to be, Rafiq, no matter how much we might wish they were. He walked to the door, then turned back. Do you remember what you told me when you found me in the desert? That I was safe. For the first time in my life, I felt that safe, real myself. Layla's eyes filled with tears again. Please go, she whispered. Outside, the villagers bowed as he passed. His simple car looked out of place among their old trucks and donkey carts. But he didn't care. As he drove back to Dubai, to his world of wealth and power, Rafiq made another decision. His mother was right about one thing. Village girls didn't belong in his world, so maybe it was time to change his world. The sun was setting over the desert as he drove, painting the sand gold. Somewhere ahead, his family waited. Princess Samira waited. His empire waited, but his heart stayed behind in a small village clinic, with a woman who saw through his wealth to the man beneath. And Sheikh Rafiq Al-Mansour, the most powerful man in Dubai, was tired of living without his heart. The dinner with Princess Samira's family was a disaster. Rafiq arrived late, his mind still in the village with Layla. He barely spoke, ignored the princess's attempts at conversation, and finally left early, shocking everyone. This is unacceptable. His mother confronted him in his private study afterward. Do you know what you've done? The insult to their family? I don't care, Rafiq said, pouring himself a drink. I'm not marrying her. His mother's face hardened. This is about that village girl, isn't it? Hassan told me you went to see her today. Her name is Layla. I don't care what her name is. His mother's voice rose. You are Sheikh Al-Mansour, the most powerful man in Dubai. You cannot throw everything away for some peasant nurse. Rafiq slammed his glass down. She saved my life. While all of you were here planning how to divide my empire if I died, she took care of me without even knowing who I was. His mother fell silent, studying him. When she spoke again, her voice was dangerously calm. You leave me no choice, my son. The next morning, Layla arrived at her clinic to find it locked. A notice on the door declared the building unsafe, ordered closed by the city authorities. But how? She asked the village elder. This building has been here for years. It's not just the clinic, he said sadly. They're stopping the new medical center too, something about permits being denied. Layla felt sick. She knew what this was about. Who this was about. Her phone rang. An unknown number. Miss Layla, a smooth voice said. This is Hassan Al-Mansour, Sheikh Rafiq's brother. We need to talk. They met at the edge of the village. Hassan arrived in a luxury car with tinted windows. He looked out of place in his expensive suit. Let's be direct, he said. My brother is not thinking clearly. This infatuation with you threatens everything our family has built. I haven't encouraged anything, Layla protested. I told him it couldn't work, but it continues. Hassan pulled out an envelope. Inside is enough money to build 10 clinics, plus a visa to America, a fresh start, far from here. Layla stared at the envelope. You want me to leave? I want you to do what's best for everyone, including Rafiq. Hassan's voice softened. You know this can't work. Our world would destroy you, and loving you would destroy him. Tears filled Layla's eyes. I never asked for any of this. I just helped someone who needed help. Then help him one more time. Leave. Let him return to who he's meant to be. Hassan left the envelope on a rock between them. The wind made the papers inside rustle. That night, Layla couldn't sleep. She thought about Rafiq, not the sheikh but the man she'd cared for. The man who looked at her like she was precious. The man who made her heart race. But Hassan was right. Their worlds were too different. Already her clinic was closed. The new medical center cancelled. The village was suffering because of her. Her phone buzzed. A message from Rafiq. I'm fixing this. Trust me. More tears fell. He didn't understand. Some things couldn't be fixed with money or power. The next morning, she made her decision. She wrote him a letter the old-fashioned way. Her mother always said important words should be written by hand. Dear Rafiq, what we shared was beautiful because it was simple, real. But that time is over. You are Sheikh Al-Mansour, and you have responsibilities I can't begin to understand. Your family is right. I don't belong in your world. And I won't let my village suffer because of me. By the time you read this, I'll be gone. Please don't look for me. Some dreams are meant to stay dreams. Thank you for showing me that even the most powerful man can have a gentle heart. Now please, let me go, Layla. She left the letter at her house and walked to the bus station. Hassan's envelope was in her bag, but she hadn't opened it. She'd use only enough for a ticket to her cousin's house in another emirate. As the bus pulled away, she looked back at her village one last time. Somewhere in Dubai, Rafiq was probably in his office signing million-dollar deals. She prayed he would understand. Sometimes love meant letting go, but life rarely goes as planned, and neither Layla nor Rafiq knew that their story was about to take an unexpected turn, because at that very moment in his Dubai office, Rafiq was making the biggest decision of his life. And Hassan, watching his brother's unusual behavior, was setting in motion a plan that would change everything. The desert wind blew across the empty village clinic, carrying secrets and promises. A storm was coming, not of sand, but of hearts, and choices and consequences that would shake the very foundation of the Al-Mansour empire. Rafiq found Layla's letter the next morning when he drove to the village to fix the clinic situation. The moment he read it, he knew his brother was behind this. "Where is she?" he demanded from the village elder. "She left early this morning, Your Excellency." She didn't say where she was going. Rafiq rushed back to Dubai, straight to his brother's office. He threw open the door so hard it slammed against the wall. "What did you do?" he roared. Hassan looked up calmly from his desk. "I did what was necessary, what you were too blinded by emotion to do yourself. You had no right. I had every right." Hassan stood up. "I'm protecting our family's legacy. The legacy you seem so eager to throw away for some village girl." Rafiq grabbed his brother's collar. "Tell me what you did. Where did you send her?" "She made her own choice, brother. I merely showed her the reality of the situation." Security guards rushed in, hearing the commotion. But they stopped short, unsure what to do when they saw the two most powerful men in Dubai facing off. Rafiq let go of his brother. His voice turned cold, controlled, more dangerous than his anger. "You've forgotten something, brother. I'm not just your brother. I'm Sheikh Al-Mansour, and you work for me." Hassan's face paled. "What are you saying?" "You're fired. Effective immediately. Clear out your office. If you're not gone in an hour, I'll have security remove you." "You can't do this. I'm your brother. Watch me." Rafiq turned to the security guards. "Escort Mr. Hassan out. He no longer has access to this building." Back in his office, Rafiq made calls. He had resources, private investigators, security teams. Someone would find Layla. His mother burst in. "Have you lost your mind? Firing your own brother?" "He interfered in my personal life. He drove away someone I care about." "Good. He did what needed to be done." His mother's voice shook. "Your father would be ashamed of you." "No, mother. Father would be ashamed of how we've lost our way." Rafiq looked at the city he'd helped build. "We've forgotten where we came from. We were desert people once, simple, honorable. When did money become more important than humanity?" "You're talking nonsense, am I?" He turned to face her. "Layla has more honor, more humanity in her little finger than most of the people in our social circle have in their whole bodies. She helped me without knowing who I was. She cared for me as a person, not a bank account. And now she's gone, his mother said. Accept it, return to your duties. No. Rafiq pressed a button on his desk. Send in the board members. 20 minutes later, his office was full of nervous-looking men in expensive suits. Gentlemen, Rafiq said, I'm making some changes. He laid out his plan. The company would shift focus. More charitable projects, schools, hospitals, infrastructure for poor communities. But the profits, one board member stuttered, will be enough. We'll still build hotels and office towers, but not at the expense of helping people who need. Hit? The shareholders won't like this, another warned. Then they can sell their shares. I'll buy them myself if necessary. After they left, Rafiq made another call. To a jeweler. I need something special, he said. Simple but beautiful, like a desert flower. Of course, Your Excellency. What's the occasion? I'm going to ask someone to marry me, if I can find her. His mother, who had stayed quiet during the board meeting, gasped. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious. Rafiq looked at his mother. I love her, and when I find her, I'm going to marry her, with or without this family's blessing. You'll ruin everything your father built. So no, I'll make it better, stronger, because it will have a heart, not just a bank account. His phone rang. One of his investigators. Your Excellency, we found her. She bought a bus ticket to Al Ain. Rafiq grabbed his car keys. His mother blocked the door. If you do this, if you choose her, you'll regret it forever. No, mother, my only regret would be letting her go. He drove himself again, racing against time. The desert stretched endlessly around him, just like the day of the attack. But this time, he wasn't running away from danger. He was running toward love. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and pink. Somewhere ahead, a bus carried his heart away from him. But not for long, because Sheikh Rafiq al-Mansour had made his choice. And for the first time in his life, he was choosing love over duty, heart over money, reality over appearance. The desert wind whipped around his car, carrying the scent of change. Behind him, his empire might be shaking. His family might be angry. The business world might be confused. But ahead was the only future he wanted. A future with a woman who saw him as just a man. A woman who taught him that the simplest things in life, kindness, care, love, were worth more than all his billions. The road stretched before him like destiny, and this time he wouldn't let her go. The bus to Al Ain was half empty. Layla sat by the window, watching the desert pass by. Every mile that took her away from her village, away from him, felt like a physical pain in her chest. An old woman sat next to her, noticing her tears. Are you all right, my dear? Layla wiped her eyes. Yes, thank you. Just leaving home is harder than I expected. Ah, the old woman nodded wisely. But are you leaving home or running away from something? The question hit too close to home. Layla turned back to the window, remembering Rafiq's face when he visited her clinic. The way he looked at her like she was the most precious thing in his world. Sometimes, she said softly, we have to run away to protect the people we love. The old woman patted her hand. Love doesn't need protection, my dear. It needs courage. In her bag, Hassan's envelope felt heavy. She still hadn't opened it. The money inside could change her life, give her a fresh start. But it felt wrong, like betrayal. The bus stopped at a small desert station for a break. Layla got out to stretch her legs. The afternoon sun was hot, making the air shimmer over the sand. Her phone buzzed. A message from one of her young patient's mothers. The clinic is open again. Sheikh al-Mansour himself came and ordered it reopened. Where are you, Layla? He's looking for you. Her heart jumped. He had come, he had fixed the clinic, but it was too late. She had made her decision. She turned her phone off, fighting back fresh tears. Back on the bus, the old woman was reading a newspaper. The headline caught Layla's eye. Sheikh al-Mansour fires brother in dramatic family dispute, may I? Layla took the paper with trembling hands. The article told how Sheikh Rafiq had publicly fired his brother Hassan and announced major changes to the company's direction. There was speculation about a personal conflict between the brothers. Such drama with these rich people, the old woman commented. always fighting over money. But Layla knew better. This wasn't about money. This was about her, about them. She remembered the last time she saw him, in her clinic. The way he said her name, the gentleness in his touch, the promise in his eyes. The bus arrived in Al Ain as the sun was setting. Her cousin Sarah was waiting at the station. "Layla? What's wrong? Your message scared me." Sarah lived in a small apartment near the hospital where she worked as a receptionist. She made tea while Layla told her everything. "Let me get this straight," Sarah said. "Sheikh Rafiq Al-Mansour, the billionaire, is in love with you, and you ran away? It's complicated. Sounds simple to me. He loves you. You obviously love him. His family would never accept me. They already showed that by closing my clinic. But he reopened it. He fired his own brother for you." Sarah shook her head. "Girl, do you know how many women dream of a man who would do that for them?" Layla got up, pacing the small living room. "You don't understand. His world, it's so different. The parties, the politics, the pressure. I'm just a village nurse." "No," Sarah said firmly. "You're the woman who saved his life, who saw him as a person, not a sheikh. Maybe that's exactly what his world needs." Outside, the city lights twinkled. So different from her quiet village. Everything was different now. Her phone lay silent on the table. If she turned it on, would there be messages from him? Was he really looking for her? Sarah turned on the TV for the evening news. Suddenly, Rafiq's face filled the screen. He was making some kind of announcement. "Turn it up," Layla gasped. "And so, Al-Mansour Enterprises will be redirecting 50% of our resources to humanitarian projects," Rafiq was saying. "Schools, hospitals, infrastructure for communities in need. This is not just charity. This is our duty as human beings." The reporters were shouting questions. "Sheikh Al-Mansour, is this connected to your brother's dismissal? Is it true you're cancelling the marriage negotiations with Princess Samira? Are the rumors about a village girl true?" Rafiq raised his hand for silence. When he spoke, his voice was firm. "My personal life is private. But yes, someone taught me recently that true wealth isn't in our bank accounts. It's in how we treat others, in the kindness we show, in the love we give." He looked directly into the camera, and Layla felt like he was looking right at her. Sometimes we find our greatest treasures in the simplest places, and when we do, we should be brave enough to choose them over everything else. Layla's tears fell freely now. Sarah hugged her. "That man loves you, cousin, really loves you. But what if love isn't enough? What if I can't survive in his world?" "Maybe you're not meant to survive in his world," Sarah said gently. "Maybe you're meant to change it." A knock at the door made them both jump. Sarah went to answer it. "Yes, I'm looking for Layla." That voice. Layla's heart stopped. Because sometimes, no matter how far you run, love finds you anyway. Sarah opened the door wider, and there he was. Sheikh Rafiq Al-Mansour, the most powerful man in Dubai, standing in the doorway of a simple apartment building. He'd loosened his tie and his usually perfect hair was messy from driving. "How did you find me?" Layla whispered. "I would have searched every city, every village, every house in the Emirates to find you." He stepped into the apartment. "But I had help. The old woman on your bus, she works for me." Layla remembered the wise old woman, her knowing smile. "You planned this? I knew Hassan had done something. I knew you might run." He moved closer. "But I couldn't let you disappear from my life, not without fighting for us." Sarah quietly slipped out of the apartment, closing the door behind her. "I saw you on TV," Layla said. "The changes you're making to your company. Because of you." He took her hands in his. "You showed me what really matters. Not money or power, but helping others, making a difference. Your family won't accept this. Accept me. I don't care." His voice was firm. "I fired my brother. I stood up to my mother. I'm changing my whole company, all for you." "That's what scares me." Layla pulled away. "I'm not worth all this trouble. Your life was perfect before you met me." "Perfect?" He laughed without humor. "I was empty inside, surrounded by people who only wanted my money, my power. Then I met a woman who cared for me without knowing who I was, who talked to me, really talked to me about things that mattered." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. "No," Layla gasped. "Don't." "Yes." He opened the box. Inside was a ring, simple but beautiful. A single desert rose made of pink diamonds. "This is who we are, simple but precious, beautiful but strong, like the desert itself. Rafiq, please." Tears fell down her cheeks. "Let me finish." He took her hand again. "I'm not asking you to become someone you're not. I'm not asking you to give up your work or your calling. I'm asking you to help me make my world better, to bring your kindness, your humanity, to a place that desperately needs it. But the society people, the business world, will learn to accept you, or they can leave. I don't care about them. I care about you." He got down on one knee, still holding her hand. "Layla, when I was lost in the desert, you found me. But you didn't just save my life, you saved my soul." She looked at him, this powerful man kneeling before her in a simple apartment. "Your mother will never forgive you. She'll learn to love." "Hugh, how could she not? The press will be cruel. Let them talk, we know the truth. Your business partners might leave. Then they were never worth having." Layla touched his face gently. "You would really give up everything for me?" "No." He smiled. "I would gain everything with you. A real life, a true purpose, love." Outside, the city hummed with life. Somewhere in Dubai, his family was probably furious. Business partners were probably worried. Society people were probably gossiping. But here, in this moment, none of that mattered. "The clinic in the village," Layla said softly. "I can't abandon my patients. We'll make it the best clinic in the Emirates. Train more healers, help more people. I won't wear fancy dresses or act like a society lady. I love you in your simple clothes with your caring heart. I'll speak my mind, even in front of important people." "Good. They need to hear the truth." "Sometimes," she looked at the ring again, "a desert rose, like them, something beautiful born from the harsh sand. People will say you married beneath you." "No." He stood up, pulling her close. "They'll say I reached up to marry someone better than me. Someone with a pure heart and a beautiful soul." The desert wind blew through the open window, carrying the scent of possibility, of change, of love. "Yes," Layla whispered. "Yes, yes, I'll marry you." She smiled through her tears. "Not because you're Sheikh Al-Mansour, but because you're Rafiq, the man I found in the desert, the man I fell in love with." He slipped the ring on her finger, then pulled her into a kiss that felt like coming home. Sarah peeked in, grinning. "Should I call the TV stations? This is pretty big news." "No," Rafiq said, holding Layla close. "Tonight is just for us. Tomorrow, we'll face the world together." That night, they sat on Sarah's small balcony, drinking tea from simple cups, talking about their future, about combining their worlds instead of choosing between them, about building something new, something that took the best of both their lives. The stars twinkled above, the same stars that had watched over them in the desert, the same stars that would watch their story unfold. Because sometimes the greatest love stories aren't about fancy parties or expensive gifts. Sometimes they're about two hearts finding each other in the vast desert of life and choosing to walk together no matter what the world might say. The news of Sheikh Rafiq Al-Mansour's engagement to a village nurse exploded across Dubai like a sandstorm. By morning, reporters camped outside Sarah's apartment building. Their cameras flashed as Rafiq and Layla emerged together, hand in hand. "Sheikh Al-Mansour, is it true you're abandoning your arranged marriage to Princess Samira?" "Miss Layla, how does it feel to become one of the richest women in the Middle East?" Rafiq squeezed her hand. "Remember, we face everything together now." Back at the Al-Mansour palace, Sheikha Amina waited in the grand sitting room. Her face was stern, but her eyes showed something else when she saw her son's happiness. "Mother," Rafiq said, "this is Layla, the woman I'm going to marry." Layla stepped forward, her head high. She wore simple clothes, no designer labels, no expensive jewelry except her engagement ring, but she carried herself with dignity. "Your Highness," she said, "I know you think I'm not good enough for your son, but I love him. Not his money, not his title, just him." The older woman studied her for a long moment. "You understand what you're walking into? This world will eat you alive." "No, it won't. Rafiq said firmly. Because we're going to change this world. Change? His mother laughed without humor. You think love can change generations of tradition? Yes, Layla surprised them by answering. Love changed your son. Love made him see beyond money and power. Why can't it change other things too? Sheikha Amina stood up slowly. She walked to Layla, looking closely at her face. You're either very brave or very foolish. Maybe both, Layla smiled slightly, but I'm honest. And I promise you this, I will never hurt your son. I will never use him for money or power. I will only love him and support him in making this family's legacy even greater. Something flickered in the older woman's eyes. Recognition, perhaps, of the same strength she'd had once when she was young and in love with Rafiq's father. You'll need proper clothes, she said finally, and lessons in protocol. Mother, Rafiq started to protest. No, she's right, Layla touched his arm. I need to learn, but I won't change who I am inside. Good, Sheikha Amina surprised them both. Because that's who my son fell in love with. It wasn't acceptance exactly, but it was a start. Hassan came next, bursting into the palace despite the security guards. Have you lost your mind? He shouted at his brother. Marrying a village girl? The shareholders are panicking. Let them, Rafiq said calmly. Our company's new direction is set. Either support it or sell your shares. You're destroying everything father built. No, Layla stepped forward. He's making it stronger, by giving it a heart. Hassan looked at her with contempt. You think you can just walk into our world, play at being a princess? I don't want to be a princess, Layla said firmly. I want to be a nurse who helps people, who happens to love your brother. Love, Hassan spat the word. Love doesn't build empires. No, Rafiq put his arm around Layla, but it makes them worth having. The next weeks were a whirlwind. Layla moved into the palace but insisted on continuing her work at the village clinic. Every morning she drove her simple car past the shocked faces of society ladies in their luxury vehicles. The press followed her everywhere. They wrote stories about her simple background, her work with poor patients, her unpolished manners, but they also wrote about how she treated everyone with kindness, how she used her new position to help others, how she was changing the way people saw the Al-Mansour family. Rafiq's business partners were skeptical at first, but when they saw how his new charitable projects brought positive publicity, how his genuine concern for people's welfare actually improved their profits, they started to come around. One evening, Rafiq found Layla in the palace garden, sitting by the fountain. She was still wearing her nurse's uniform. Tired? He asked, sitting beside her. A little. We had many patients today. She leaned against him. Your mother's protocol teacher says I'm hopeless at formal dining. Apparently I used the wrong fork for salad, he laughed. Do you regret saying yes? Never. She turned to face him. But sometimes I wonder if I'm doing enough. There's so much need in the world, so many people we could help. That's why I love you. He kissed her forehead. You make me want to be better. Do more. Inside the palace, servants were preparing for their engagement party. Society people would come, royalty from other countries, business leaders from around the world. Are you ready for tomorrow? He asked. All those people watching us? No, she smiled. But we'll face it together, remember? A commotion at the palace gates caught their attention. They walked over to see what was happening. It was the village people, dozens of them. Old Mrs. Fatima, the children Layla treated, their parents. They carried simple gifts and home-cooked food we heard about. Your fancy engagement party tomorrow, Mrs. Fatima called out. But we wanted to celebrate with you our way first. Tears filled Layla's eyes. These were her people. This was her world. Rafiq surprised everyone by opening the palace gates wide. Come in, he said. All of you. This palace needs more real celebration, more honest joy. That night the grand palace halls rang with laughter. Village women spread their homemade feast in the formal dining room. Children played in the marble corridors. Old men told stories in the garden. Sheikha Amina watched from her balcony as her son and his bride-to-be danced with the village people, ate simple food with their hands, laughed without restraint, and for the first time, she understood. Her son hadn't lost his way, he'd found it. 1 year later, the desert bloomed with flowers. The same spot where Rafiq had collapsed, where Layla had found him, was now transformed. A grand medical center rose from the sand, but not like the cold hospitals in Dubai. This one had gardens where healers grew traditional herbs. Children played in courtyards designed like old village squares. Modern medicine met ancient wisdom. "Ready?" Rafiq asked, holding Layla's hand. They stood before the center's main entrance. Hundreds of people waited. Villagers, city folks, reporters, even royalty from neighboring countries. All came to see the grand opening of the Al Mansour Desert Healing Center. "Remember when you found me here?" Rafiq whispered. "Half dead in the sand?" "How could I forget? You were the most stubborn patient I ever had." Layla smiled, adjusting her white doctor's coat. She'd finally agreed to get her medical degree, but she still practiced traditional healing too. The past year had changed everything, yet some things stayed beautifully the same. Layla still spoke her mind, still wore simple clothes when she wasn't at official functions. She'd learned which fork to use for salad, but preferred eating with her hands when possible. Rafiq had changed too. The hard businessman now sat with village elders, learning their wisdom. He built hospitals and schools, but made sure they respected local traditions. His company's profits actually grew. People trusted a business that cared about more than just money. "Your Excellencies," Hassan stepped forward. "The guests are waiting." Yes, Hassan was back. It had taken months, but seeing how his brother's marriage actually made the family stronger, he'd finally understood. Now he ran the charitable side of the business, working closely with Layla. "Mother's crying again," Rafiq noticed. Sheikha Amina stood with the guests, dabbing her eyes. She'd become Layla's fierce defender in society, proud of how her daughter-in-law brought honor to the family through her work. "Let's not keep them waiting," Layla said. They cut the ribbon together. The crowd cheered as they toured the facility. Modern operating rooms alongside traditional healing gardens, prayer rooms next to intensive care units. Poor village children played with rich city kids in the pediatric ward. "This is better than I dreamed," Layla whispered, watching a village grandmother teach young doctors about herbal remedies. "You made it happen," Rafiq kissed her hand. "You showed us how to blend the best of both worlds." Later that evening, they escaped the celebrations for a moment alone. They walked to the exact spot where they'd first met. "I have something to tell you," Layla said softly. "What is it?" She took his hand and placed it on her stomach. His eyes widened. "Really?" She nodded, happy tears in her eyes. "The desert gave me a lost sheikh once. Now it's giving us a baby." Rafiq pulled her close, his own eyes wet. Their child would be born into a different world than either of them had known. A world where wealth meant more than money, where power meant the ability to help others, where love crossed all boundaries. The sun set over the desert, painting the sky in golds and pinks. Inside the medical center, two worlds celebrated together. Village wisdom and city progress, ancient traditions and modern dreams, proof that love could indeed change everything. "I love you," Rafiq whispered to his wife, "my desert flower." "I love you too," Layla touched his face, "my stubborn sheikh." They stood together as darkness fell, two people who had dared to challenge tradition, to fight for love, to build something new from the eternal sands. Behind them, the medical center glowed like a beacon in the desert night. Before them stretched the endless dunes where their story began, and within them grew the next chapter of their tale, a child who would inherit the best of both worlds. Old Mrs. Fatima, watching from the center's garden, smiled knowingly. "You see," she told the other villagers, "true love is like the desert wind. It goes where it wishes, changes what it touches, and brings life to barren places." Inside the medical center, rich and poor shared meals together. Children from the city learned desert healing songs. Doctors in expensive suits consulted with village healers in traditional clothes, and in a quiet corner of the garden, a single desert rose bloomed under the stars. Like love itself, it had grown from the harsh. Sand defied the odds and created something beautiful. Because sometimes the greatest journeys start with getting lost. Sometimes the richest treasures are found in the simplest hearts. And sometimes, just sometimes, a sheikh and a village nurse can change the world. Their story would be told for generations in both palace and village. Not just a love story, but a story of change, of courage, of two hearts brave enough to build a bridge between two worlds. As the stars appeared one by one, Rafiq and Layla held each other close. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new adventures, new chances to make a difference. But tonight they were just a man and a woman, standing in the desert where they first met, grateful that fate and a broken-down convoy had brought them together. The desert wind danced around them, carrying the scent of herbs from Layla's garden, the echo of children's laughter from the medical center, the promise of a future built on love. And somewhere, high above, the desert stars twinkled their approval. Because they knew what Rafiq and Layla had learned, that true love, like the desert itself, endures. It adapts, it transforms, and in its power to change hearts and minds, it creates oases of hope in the most unexpected places. The end.